The Smiling Human podcast is made possible by listeners like you. If you would like to experience more of these shows into the future, then please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/thesmilinghuman. Hello, and welcome to The Smiling Human, where collectively we evolve through inquiry. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Smiling Human podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Laura Brennan Ballet. As a global top-selling author of The Science of Empowerment, a transformational coach, and speaker on mind development and human awareness, Laura's skill set, gathered wisdom, and personal discipline to advance human potential is the lifeblood of her work. The care and consideration that she brings to her clients, attendees, and listeners around the globe orients them powerfully towards their own empowerment. She brings a bright and high energy that awakens the feeling that all things are possible. And I'll tell you personally, I absolutely felt this while she and I were speaking. Furthermore, she emphatically emphasizes that our greatest creations begin in co-creative relationships. So, for those of you who are willing to expand your present mindset, dissolve negative patterns of behavior, and elevate into your own unique potential, you are in for a 360-degree view on how to activate your own unique personal power. This is a deep, resonant, and illuminated conversation, one of my favorites so far, and I feel deeply grateful to be able to share it with you. I hope you enjoy. Beautiful. Laura, thank you so much for being here and being on the Smiling Human podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited. I had such a wonderful conversation with you when we first met. So it kind of feels like friends getting together and talking. So I'm excited. I love the opportunity. Thank you.
That's one of the things that undergirds really great conversation is when there's a connection that goes beyond ideas. So thank you for bringing voice to that. I will ask you the question I ask all guests at the head of the show, which is, what's the last thing that made you smile? You might know what it is.
Well, you know what it is. So I'm going to share with the listening audience. I just cracked the 100 best-selling code for Amazon in 3 separate categories. So I'm in the top 100 in 3 areas that are very important to me to reach readership and help empower. And I just found that out about maybe 20 minutes ago. So that made me smile.
As it should. Well deserved, Laura. I'm
Thank
very
you.
excited to be able to record on such a wonderful and prosperous day for you. So,
Yeah, that's exclusive to your podcast.
yeah, there you go. You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
Too good. So, the book is The Science of Empowerment, and there's a little bit of an intro that the guests got at the head of the show. But before we dive too much into the absolute gem that is contained within this, which is your equation, I would love to showcase the journey that brought this into the world. Because I know when you shared it with me first, I was quite tuned in and captivated by it. And I think it's something the listeners would benefit.
Yeah, thank you. I love expressing the gratitude around this book and how it came to be because it has much to do with my brother, Christopher Brennan. Just a heartfelt acknowledgement for his genius. The heart of the science of empowerment is the J3 = E formula. And this is for me really the science behind creating an empowered life. I just took it and put some rocket fuel to it. But it's a brother and sister who are very similar and yet, right, universes apart in the way that we kind of have grown up and how we deal with things. But we just have this beautiful synergy on mindset development and what I call positioning oneself into the power seat of choice so that we can really move into this zone of potential, i.e. unlimited thinking, and really believe in ourselves regardless of what we've gone through in our childhood. And both my brother and I experienced different traumas and kind of chaos and kind of like normal kids go through. And we've really come out, and I say this with all of my heart and not an egoic way, but we're quite remarkable human beings considering some of the things we went through. And I say that as a reflection to everyone out there that has gone through their own kind of dark journey of the soul and come out to some degree, a pretty cool and unique human being. But I love the book. My brother's a former USA gymnastics coach. And yes, he has worked with top tier Olympians. And he was working this material before it was like the sexy thing to lean into, decades ago. And he came back home from traveling around the country, United States of America. Yay, USA. And he started putting it into our neuromuscular training facility. And I was observing and I was wondering what would happen if a regular person, such as myself, took this formula on and used it in my relationships with my husband, with my children, with the neighbors, with the people I work with and create. Would it really elevate that champion style mindset? And it absolutely did and does. And thus the book took me 5 years to write. I finished it on Independence Day a few years back. And it's just changed kind of the course of lifestyles for many of my clients and my readership, including all of the people I'm really close to. Almost everyone in my inner circle, we all live by the science of empowerment. We have some aspect of connection to something. It's either awareness to the energies or a certain principle, the formula as a whole. So it's a very unique story of my brother supporting me. He always thought I had a little bit of genius sitting somewhere inside, what he calls, like my high maintenance sister, however a brother looks at his sister, which I'm not, as you can see. I'm very like chill. But he just really supported me in coming out and sharing my artistry of storytelling and how I wanted to be in service to the collective of humanity. And the book was born, and then many things came from the book. So hopefully that gives the listeners an idea of how the science of empowerment was born.
Absolutely. Thank you, Laura. The piece that really stands out to me is that this is birthed from a relationship with excellence in the truest sense, that which excels or rests at the peak of performance, given that he was working with such high performance athletes. And so I'm curious, from your own perspective and your own journey, what was it like attempting to distill down something that was made for people who are right at the peak of performance into something that was accessible in your marriage with your kids, something that now, as the book is starting to reach more and more people, the average human being can actually apply?
Yeah, I love this question. Such an empowering question to empower the listening audience. Again, I'm a great example, so I can speak with such genuine authenticity. I was not a professional athlete. I'm very athletic. I still am, but I did not move at that level, the 10,000 skill sets to master one skill. Um, it's very simple. You decide that you are in enough pain, you don't like the way your life is unfolding. You find yourself in repeated patterns day after day, whether you're reacting or you're contributing to something that has a negative kind of energy around it. And this formula, when you run through it, it allowed you to bring this awareness to, and I don't like to use the word control, but I am in the power position. I get to choose, and it can be so simple. Getting along with a growing teenager, with all the social media, trying to create boundaries and understanding the way they react. So I learned through the formula as a parent, I'm sure there's many listening, not to go at it, whatever the it challenge is, with an expectation of how I needed it to be. The book and the writing and the formula really guided me to understand, to have such a level of compassion for someone else's journey, their own unfolding of themselves at a time when I'm expecting them to unfold differently. So it was really this amazing reflective observance of finding the gratitude and the grace to watch someone else be themselves which allowed me to be more of myself. So it was this beautiful synergistic kind of awareness that organically happened. And I have worked with 7-year-old girls. We still have them come into the gym that are starting to train. And my oldest client was 68 years old, and her whole life changed at that period of, not the end of her life, but really the beginning at that age. And it's just very simple. You apply these principles to any given condition and you move through them. You choose the state of energy that you're in. And that's just a feeling, it's an emotion, it's a thought process. And you keep moving around that formula, and it keeps reducing the static and the distortion of the issue at hand. And you find yourself neutralizing and not being so charged up. It's not complicated. It's a book of complexities, but the formula itself is not. It's very simple and very applicable. When I coach or I speak on it and we go in detail to it, it has its own flavor to it. But if you were just to know what the formula is, read it in the book and start applying it, things start shifting right away. And then very soon after, there's transformation.
The core pieces that stand out for me while I'm listening to you, Laura, is the necessity to recognize universality amongst people. That seems to be a foundational piece to what you're speaking to, as well as what is our domain and how does that intersect with the power of choice. And I'll sort of expand it a little bit for the listeners on what I mean by these core tenets. There is an argument to be made, and I think you're living proof, and I would wager that I am too, that there's such similitude between people that gets overlooked. So much so that we might dismiss particular methods or ideas such that, oh, well, maybe we think they only apply to other people. But when we are actually attuning to, maybe we call them core truths, the applicability is inescapable. And this is what I mean by universality. We cannot get away from the way our humanness is or the way the universe is operating. And being able to coalesce those understandings into actionable steps is where we shift from the universality into the questions of domain and the power of choice. Domain is, what do I have control over? Because I don't want to fool myself thinking I'm, Captain God or something like this and I can do anything. What is within my control and my influence? And the other is, once I've recognized that, now I'm able to aptly apply the empowered choice. And we move forward through action in that sense. It's only when we recognize that there is almost a transpersonal, something that goes beyond the story, like you're talking about, of where we've come from or what we believe to be the limits, that we can pop that bubble and start to make meaningful transformation into a desired direction. Is that a fair?
So beautifully stated, and thank you for taking that material and weaving it in that way. And yes, I never use the word control. For me, it is accountability, because you're right. We live in this delusion of we can control and then fill that pathway out. But we know that at any given moment, anything can cross in front of that pathway and disrupt what we thought was in control of. But when we exercise the third principle, which is accountability, this really does take the oasis off of outside conditions. And it really does put the emphasis on, how can I navigate or recalibrate? And everyone has a different vernacular: redesign, re-engineer that particular present challenge. It removes that outside influence and really does bring this almost self-actualized power to the forefront. And again, this has nothing to do with ego. This is the recognition that we are tuning in, as you said, and aligning with a universal current that is built into the human condition. And when we become aware, first principle, now we get to start fine tuning certain things. We start to position ourselves into that power seat of choice, less agitated, less frustrated, less combative, less reactionary, and more calm, more neutralized, more centralized, balanced. And again, we have all these beautiful words built into our language that have emotionality attached to them and have very strong feelings attached to them. But there's a way to move through it. Again, this formula that even if you're feeling a certain way or thinking a certain way or value or believe a thing or another thing, it keeps moving itself and spiraling upwards. It's got this trajectory up. You can't ask yourself, what am I aware of? What am I willing to do? What am I accountable for? Exercising critical thought, and what energy do I choose, and stay in a negative space. The consciousness connection doesn't allow it. You keep going, all right, what am I aware of now? I'm staying in the energetic frequency of negativity, or I keep arguing over the same thing. What am I willing to do? Well, I don't think I'm willing to keep arguing. What am I accountable for? What can I change? No blame. Not asking you to change. What can I do to neutralize critical thinking? We suspend that emotionality just for a moment to gain some clarity. And now we understand I do have the power to neutralize negative interactions, feelings, thoughts, beliefs, values, and move them more towards a positive experience, thus a positive outcome.
Mm-hmm. And I would love to add one piece before offering a question to you, which is the notion of negative and positive. I think we spoke to this in our initial conversation. When those words land in my body, there's sometimes memories of rejecting the world. It's like, oh, it's negative. I don't want this. I don't want that. And really, what I've come to, and I believe that there's an alignment here with your work and your process as well, is that that which is positive is life affirming. We are uplifting, we are feeding, we are vitalizing and operating in harmony from a cellular level, from a mental level, all the way to the cosmic if we want to go out that far. And so I just wanted to introduce that sort of reframing or additional nomenclature, so to say, that it's not that there's a bad aspect to it and we need to be sort of frightened of it. It's more so, what am I doing? And is what I am doing bringing greater vitality, greater openness, greater regeneration on all levels of my being, of myself, of my life? Or am I moving in the opposite direction? Have I anchored myself with cement shoes and I'm just trudging through and going, why is it so heavy? Well,
Yeah.
let's look at the
Yeah.
method. And so the question I wanted to offer you, you glided so gracefully over the five pieces, but I'd love for you to articulate them for the audience, those five elements.
Yeah, wonderful. And just a quick thought to what you were expressing is there's a difference too between a trigger and a mirror. And one trigger we could look at in this energetic structure of negative, but that again, it's not a bad thing. It's not an evil thing, right? It's what I call, it doesn't have the juju juice all attached to it, right? But it's a trigger. We can feel that something, where a mirror, right, can open and expand the opportunity to reflect, see back onto oneself, and then activate the five principles. So yes, the Jekyll principles, and that's a JEKL, and that's an acronym for four of the most important people to my brother. And the L is me, his sister, and there's a halo above and below, represents our parents. And it is five principles. And then when you look at the three, that's negative, positive, or neutral. And when you move through the system and the formula and you run through the principles and you choose your power seat of energy, now we begin to create what is equals E, an empowered life. So Jekyll principles, awareness to energy equals empowerment. So that's the J3 equals E. And so the principles are awareness, willingness, accountability, critical thinking, and energy. And there's big, long definitions in the book of what they are, but it's basically awareness, myself, my surroundings, willingness, What am I willing to do? Not want to do, not hope to do, not wish to do. What am I willing to do? Accountability, well, we all know this. Self accountability for me is such a universal change agent. And when I say universal, I mean literally pulling on the same frequency that creates the planet. There's a universal current that is contained within accountability. It allows us to release the blame, the shame, the guilt. Side note, after proper therapies and counseling and healing has been done. So we're coming from the conversation of an empowering position, never neglecting and sidestepping the important work that gets us to where we feel we've healed enough to now create an empowered life. I'd just like to offer that in. Fourth principle is critical thinking. And this is really rational, clear minded thinking. I also like to call it high level intellectualized thinking. Again, suspend that emotionality and act as if, believe as if, place value upon I am brilliant. I am genius. I am a child of God, the stars, consciousness, whatever fits your style of humanness, but you are something magnificent. Move away from that triggering energy that's all entangled in all of the human emotions and think from that higher quantum field of what can be possible once you release some of that emotionality. Again, this is suspension. It isn't neglecting and abandoning and pushing it off as if it doesn't have purpose. And then we go into the fifth principle, which is energy. And it's very simple: negative, positive, neutral. Which one are you? It's on the cover of the book. And this is where you really can position yourself into that power seat. And it is a power seat of choice. You choose negativity, you choose neutrality, or you choose positivity. It's that three. There's only two fields of true energy in the world, negative and positive. And then we live in all this beautiful, funky shade of gray of it. But there is a formula that can move you from negative into what I call the superpower of neutrality, balance, centeredness, calm, peace, Zen. We all have a word. And now we get to start being creative, creators of an empowered life. So that's a little bit of the J3 equals E.
Brilliant, brilliant. There's so many evocative thoughts that come through when you touch on these five principles, because they are principle. They are such an intrinsic and necessary tapestry, we might say, as you have presented it, to our optimal functioning in terms of our mentality, in terms of our physicality, in terms of our emotionality. And I love that you put the notion of like entertaining. We're in a realm of suspense, not a realm of neglect. And what came to mind immediately was the improv notion of yes and. Like,
Yes.
right? Here we are with whatever's going on, and that might be a story that's coming from a trigger. It might be the notion of what is possible that's dictated by our memories. It might be fears. It might be whatever it is. All of them valid, not all of them true. And being able to look at them and say, okay, that's the awareness piece. That's what's here, right? I can see that. I can survey that. Let's take a really good inventory. Yes. And what is a more elevated, more expansive, and more inclusive to truth perspective that we can bring alongside? Not
Yes.
to supersede, not to delete, but it's about incorporating. And I really think this integral approach to wellness, the yes and approach, if we might call it that, is the only thing that actually produces long-term transformation. Anytime I've ever seen a method that has neglect woven into it, I always see people falling off and not being able to do this, or experiencing types of negative consequences that were not predictable by the person putting it forward. And I suppose that is because we can't expect anything to go away in this universe. It will go hiding. And when it goes hiding, it's going to come out sideways. And that is why, in at least a few words, it's so beautiful to hear that you're able to bring that in as well. We're not neglecting, but we are yes anding.
Yeah, you can't. It's imprinted. It's imprinted in our own individual experience, and it's, to neglect it or shun away from it. And again, so many ways we can describe what that would be, is a disservice to the experience in and of itself. But to, or not but and to create an empowered life, an elevated evolutionary experience while we're in our humanness. It is a beautiful technique and a mindset to know that I can suspend for a moment, to recalibrate the wiring, the thought process, the level and the depth of that feeling. We can lighten our load just a bit to give us traction, so that that intention, that action, that desire can gather that momentum. We're not so weighted down when we give ourselves permission, again, not to neglect, not to label, shun, lock away, cage, right? The monster of whatever that was, but to feed it, nourish it, take care of it, but then also be able to walk away from it and create life. And so many of us don't have a way to do that. We become that story. We become that chosen belief. I am unworthy. I lack the confidence. My mother didn't want me, and all of the stories that we've, father was an alcoholic, therefore. Um, I think when we are able to look at, again, is everything is a trigger or a mirror in that sense. Do I allow it to trigger me, which keeps us right in connection to more of the negative, or can I use it as a mirror, something clear and very refined visually, and use that to see a better part of myself outside of that said experience? And it's you can do this in moments, and you keep doing it and you get better and better, and then the stories just start shifting and the belief in yourself starts elevating, and you really do begin to understand that I can change. I can become a better version, a better aspect of myself. I can dream and goal and think outside of what I've become, and I can give myself permission to become something anew. And the formula just has this beautiful kind of synergistic flow. And believe me, my brother studied and worked, and we both did, of how we put it together. And then, of course, with all the science of empowerment, the writing behind it, it really was so thought through, so that when the reader journeys through the book, there's nothing about me in the book, maybe about the author I had to put in at the end. It really is this. It is, how are you perceiving? What is your perspective? Because right at the first chapter, regardless of your present circumstance or condition, you can transform, you can begin to change. And it's right there. So immediately it gives you permission to open up that limited thinking, not like, well, I can do something a little different, but no, it's, I can do differently. And as you said so beautifully.
Mm. Well, and speaking on that point of transformation, I find a curiosity arising as I listen to this last piece that you put forward. And I'm curious, is it the case that one can transform a trigger into a mirror, or are these two pieces sort of treated as distinct experiences?
Again, I think it's in the eye of the holder, but I do believe that all triggers can be transformed into mirrors. What was once a trigger of guilt could now be a mirror of forgiveness, as an example. It's moving those energies from that negative to neutral to positive. And when we talk about negative and positive, again, we're not looking at it as everything is either or. There's just beautiful nuances within each of those kind of constructs. But the neutrality part is that beautiful, like, resting ridge. It's almost like taking a arduous hike. You get to the top and it's just like, and you can just kind of catch your breath and you can realize that used to trigger me. And now when it shows up, I've got a whole different response system built in place. I've rewired that neuronal pathway, and it's no longer a trigger. It is now a mirror to a better part of myself because I've done the work.
Thank you. Beautifully put. Perhaps we have reached the halfway peak of this
That went by
conversation.
fast.
I know, and we'll take a short break and we'll come back with the second half of the show. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. I wanted to take a brief moment to talk about just how you can help this show grow into the future. Did you know that we have an Instagram, a YouTube, and a Patreon? Probably. But if you're listening on YouTube, like many of you are, I would invite you to subscribe, to like this video if you've enjoyed it, and to leave a comment. Let me know what you thought. Let me know if you have any questions or maybe guests that you want me to interview. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music or any other podcast platform, then please take this moment to rate the show. All of these actions go a long way to helping the Smiling Human podcast reach more people and grow into the future. Thank you so much. Wonderful. We are now back with the second half of the show, which means we are into the section called the Question of the Week. This is where I ask our guests to bring forward an inquiry, something that's meaningful to them. Maybe they want my take on it, or they believe it would be important for the listeners to hear us discuss. So, Laura?
Yes. So when you and I first met, there were many questions that came into my consciousness around just the way you express yourself and carry yourself and the vocabulary. And again, I'm going to use this word, the artistry. I just think is so beautiful. I love the way you speak and you share and the brilliant part of your mind. So my question is, 'cause I'm all about, you know this, I'm all about empowering self because I believe that is truly the most authentic way to empower other people. So if you could create an empowerment tool, what would it be?
Wow. That's one of the more unique questions I've ever received.
Yeah.
I can say for sure that in the work that I've done in offering counsel and mentorship, facilitation, in person, online, large group, small group, the central piece has always been, and you'll get a kick out of this because it ties into the first principle of your list, but it's presence. It's presence because when we start to cultivate the capacity to be present, attentive, and aware, we are now opening the aperture of our consciousness, of our being, to attend to all of the different aspects of our humanness. And that might be the deep stuff, the uncomfortable stuff. It might be our own glory and capacity for greatness and everything in between. And so learning to, this for me anyways, learning to align my attention back to the present, even when there is turmoil, emotional activation, confusion, sensory overload, staying here,
Hmm.
that piece is what I would say is the foundation. Once we have started to cultivate this presence practice, then the capacity for present moment discernment is made possible. And what do I mean by present moment discernment? Well, it's very much like you articulated in the first half of the show when we talked about suspending, right?
Mhm.
When we're discerning, really at base, we're discerning truth from falsehood. And falsehood isn't the opposite of truth, but it is the absence of truth. And so when we're practicing discernment, we are therefore drawing our attention to whatever it is that is present for us. If it's a sensation in the body, if it's a story arising in the mind, if it's an emotion that's coming through, if it's all of them at once,
Mhm.
great. And looking at it not in a detached, dissociative kind of way, but in that sort of suspense way. I'm present with it. I'm witnessing it. Where is the truth in this?
Mm.
Because it is very likely that how my brain is articulating it at first kick is not the most truthful articulation of what's actually going on, and learning that about ourselves. And
Mm.
look, I have a tendency to respond to the world in this way. And this kind of response is limited in its truth value in these kinds of ways. Right? Now, when that comes up, I go, okay, this in context with this presencing and discernment will allow me to more rapidly, moment by moment, return to a center of truth from which I can make a more empowered choice, regardless of the situation. So I think being able to find the intersection of presence, discernment, and choice would be what I would offer.
I love that. There's probably 101 questions, right? I could have asked you, but this one came so clearly through all of what you do and your service, right? I thought this was such again, an empowering way to showcase how your mind thinks of what would be an empowerment tool for you, because now the listeners are going to know they can relate to being present, and they may not always be able to stay in that presence, but you can learn to move in and out and really activate that muscle and that repetitiveness of moving in, staying a little bit longer. And now we even get to exercise a little bit outside of that comfort zone. I'm in it, but I want to run from it. I'm going to stay with the presence of it. And that's such an empowering tool to have. And and yes, Eckhart talks about, the power of now and we all know this, and really being present, but it is one of the conditions built into the human experience that eludes almost all of us. We don't have the ability to stay present very long. There's always something pulling at us and going in a different direction. And so I think that's not only supportive and helpful, but absolutely purposeful for someone out there. And I do this with my clients. We build a skill word vocabulary, a toolbox. We have different ways of looking at it, but now the listeners can take that word presence and remind themselves, I am working on creating an empowered life. And I can do that by staying connected to the present moment. And it's okay if I falter back, I lose my balance, I get a little off center, I can come right back in, and I'll piggyback on that empowerment tool and bring in the formula after that. What am I aware of? I'm moving away from the present moment. What am I willing to do? Go back into it. Who's accountable? Only me. I can't get that other person to do what I'm doing, right? Critical thinking. Presence is clear and rational thinking, suspending that emotionality. Which energy am I? I'm neutral right now. I'm neutral, almost neutral to positive in the presence, because I'm already activating something that's really, truly empowering not only myself now, but my future self that I'm becoming.
Absolutely. And in the break, the listeners wouldn't have heard, but we spoke about the natural alignment that has arisen between our different fields of work. And so it's no surprise to me that whatever arose from me was so easily aligned with this method. There's two pieces that I think are an, perhaps an interesting thing to add to our discussion at present, which is the notion of critical thinking. I can almost already hear people maybe raising their hackles and going, oh, we don't want to be in the mind too much. We can't apply reason and rationality to everything. It's like, yes. And consider, if you will, for a moment, that the rational mind can actually reason itself to silence. And this is an interesting notion. Most people don't think about this. Most people think that the mind is this ongoing, continual piece, but it can be an expression of critical thinking to ask yourself, do I need to be thinking right now?
Mm.
What action might I take, right? What am I willing to do? I'm willing to shut up. I'm willing to not ruminate and not believe that my mind is going to be the sole mechanism by which I come back into contact with truth. I've said it before on the show and I'll say it again. The heart has reason that reason knows not. Sometimes we have to use our reason to get out of it.
I love this. I specialize in thought energy. It's just something that I've coined in my book. I speak about it all over. It is just there's some aspect of my consciousness that connects, and I talk about really redesigning the architecture of thought. And people are like, "What do you mean?" My thought, exactly what you just said. It isn't that the mind moves in those loops of what I call algorithms, outside influence, input into data, heart, consciousness, body, mind, and then it's an algorithm, and we move on that wave of those algorithms. When you start to become present in the moment and become more aware, what am I thinking? Why am I thinking that way? And I'm bringing it right back. And then we have our reasoning. Well, this person did this to me. I'm mad about this, or I'm frustrated on this. And there's the loop. What am I willing to do about the way I'm thinking? Change my thought process. Number one, quiet my mind. And this is where some of this wellness and mental health practices come in. Journal, take a walk, literally go out in the garden, put your feet in the grass, the soil, the dirt, take a walk in the rain. We all know, play with your pop dog, bake. This allows us to be accountable to the present moment. Now we're back into fourth principle, that critical thinking. This isn't drill your mind with critical thought. This is using the skill of critical thinking to calm the algorithm down and take a moment to bring in that awareness, willingness, accountability. And what can I not only replace, but how can I create, as I said, the new neuronal pathways? How can I create a calmer version, a more peaceful, happier, open, unlimited version of myself through critical thinking? This is really being accountable to your potential and your power, where you do not let the mind just run rampant on you. Energy, we're back here. We've neutralized so much of that experience. And now we really are becoming a creator of something more positive. And you and I have talked this, we've run through this formula and all beautiful nuances around it in matter of moments of each segment we're talking, to show that this is critical thinking in action right here. Where you and I are not being triggered by emotionality. We have feelings, happiness and gratitude and appreciation and excitement and knowledge and information, but we're doing it through a clear and rational thought process. So I think when people look at thought energy, just look at there's energy around every thought. Is it negative, positive, or neutral? And how is that contributing to the process of your thinking patterns? And what can you do about it? So you're no longer thinking in ways that contribute to the habits that are quite negative, right? Patterns that can be quite destructive, and that aspect of our personality that doesn't serve our highest and best self anymore.
It reminds me in part what you've put forward here, Laura, of something that comes out of the Eastern philosophies, which is to say that the mind is an excellent servant and an awful master. And what we're talking about in being able to engage with critical thought, not as a superior method, but as one integrated into presence, a connection to willingness, power, to our own energy in the present moment. What we're doing is we're putting the mind and its innate skill in service to the heart. This is how I might recapitulate it. And what's really important about this process, insofar as I see it, is that when we are intending to make the mind a great servant, we have to recognize, at least in part, what the mind does to shape perception. That we literally are incapable of recognizing futures, potential in ourselves, potential relationships, if we are holding a particular kind of thought architecture. If I have the story that I cannot, I will not, I ought not, whatever it be, then my mind, it's not just that I'm thinking differently. We are literally interpreting all of the sense data that comes through the present moment. We're filtering through these. And this is where turning the mind on itself, it's like turning the sword back on itself. We have to start cutting away and going, look, what are the consequences of my beliefs if I play them out every day for 10 years to its logical end? Am I going to be joyful, empowered, relating positively and authentically, generative, generous, and joyful? Probably not. And if that's the case, what is it, in one case, we might ask, about the thoughts that are leading me into this more negative trajectory? Or we could also ask, what could I think that would be more true, more generative, more capable of bringing forward that kind of life? I say forward, but I really mean out, because we're trying to bring it through us in that sense. The last piece I wanted to add, which was the second part of the first response I had, if anybody's following that, which is we cannot expect to find our power anywhere except for the present. It's like we're not going to get it tomorrow. We're not going to get it yesterday. Anytime we are empowered, or at least attuned to our own power, it's a present moment experience.
And
And this is
only.
correct,
Yeah.
exclusively.
Yeah.
And that's why when we are witnessing the thoughts are what are filtering the present moment and either including or excluding realities that would allow us to become aware of our own.
So beautifully stated. And, for listeners that are following some of it, again, to really bring it to a simplistic, I think, kind of atmosphere, everything that happened in the past is dictating the present. And then the present is already pushing intentional energy out to the future. And when you stay in that present state of being, you can recognize the past, but it does not dictate what you're doing in that moment. And in that moment of recalibrating that awareness, now you get to start intentionally designing the future. But I loved what you said about the consequences. I write about this in The Science of Empowerment. What if you could get ahead of every consequence? How would you then think? How would you then behave? Right? What aspect of the personality would be front and center? How would you allow the mind to be in service to your greater good? And this is what's so important. It's built into the human condition. We go for it and I'll deal with it then. Why do people, I talk about this with my husband, he now understands it, but since I've met him, I'm like, why would you do something and deal with a consequence when you have the power to not even have the experience of the consequence at all? So I think that's very simple for the listeners. You have the ability to get ahead of all negative consequences, small, medium, large. You really do. And this is about looking at how thought has effect and causation on behavior, personality, habits, as you said. And so I think that though we're hitting on some complexities very beautifully, certain listeners might be thinking, whoa, whoa, how am I supposed to navigate all this? It's very simple. Stay present, exercise neutrality, and understand that you can use clear and rational thinking in order to recalibrate new ways of being in the world. You have that ability. We are creative energy in action. And we think that we're just somehow, tethered to all of this limited ways. And we're not. I mean, like, just untether yourself and carry on.
Mhm. Exactly right. And I deeply appreciate your capacity to bring it back down to the actionable, because again, that brings it back to the present and back to the body, which is
Yeah,
really the key piece, right?
yeah.
And I'm curious if there's something else you might offer from this gem of a book that you have here that the listeners might be able to take away today that they can maybe do after listening, or something that can help them come back into connection with their power.
Yeah. Well, of course, I'm going to say pick up an ebook or the book because it really has become known with my readership around the world as a life manual. It's not a read and done and put it away. I have, honestly, in full transparency, I have readers that have read it 4 times in different spaces of time. And it will always be anew because you are becoming anew. It won't be the same. And I think if you could just take with you, and it could be many things. It could be something, as you said, stay present as often as you can. Keep connecting to that moment, and really work at it. But have fun and be creative and let it empower you. Don't let it be this, oh my God, I have to be present every moment and I have laundry to do. And no, just be present and think about the creational energy that is embedded in your mind, body, consciousness, in your DNA. You are not this limited human. So have fun with your life. And where things are negative and challenging and disruptive, just know that you have the ability to shift and change and elevate and evolve from that. And if it isn't through the science of empowerment, or if it isn't through this podcast, there are copious amounts of wealth gems all over Google and Amazon and YouTube, and keep searching for information that feels comfortable for you, that expands the way you think about yourself in this world and how you can become just a, and when I say a better version, I don't mean that in the negative. I just mean that you have this ability to just be so much more. So don't make the daily routine complicated. Ask yourself, what am I aware of in the moment? Am I negative, positive, or neutral? And if honestly, if that's all you take with you, ask yourself, what is my awareness to my energy? What am I putting out to the world that day, to myself first and foremost? And it's as simple as when you wake up, it's just part of my way of being. Is this going to be a negative, positive, or neutral day? Every single morning before I do my morning routine, when I'm stretching, when I'm writing, when I'm reading, when I'm researching, when I'm working out, everything I do, I am in the power seat of choice. So I know I'm not giving one particular, I'm just throwing all of these seeds out so that one, if not many, will stick. But choose your energy, choose your state of mind, choose the way you think about thought, choose how present you are throughout your day. Read a book, study, educate, and apply that information. This gives you wisdom and this empowers you to create an empowered life.
Brilliant, Laura. Thank you. And to the listeners, there will be a link to the ebook for the Science of Empowerment in the show notes and the video description. So be sure to hop on there and get your copy. Dive in deep.
Yeah.
Laura, I want to thank you for that encouraging, empowering, and joyful conversation. Once again, it has been an absolute delight to share space with you.
Yeah.
For the listeners who are curious to get in touch and want to engage more with your work, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can go to the website, thescienceofempowerment.com. There's an email box there. I personally check everything. I'm all over LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. I have a brand new YouTube channel where I'm going to be doing a podcast, a weekly podcast called Elevate in 20. Just a little quick burst of empowerment nugget for everyone. And, the hard copies available, the ebooks available, coaching. I mean, I've got courses coming out, just every which way I can be of service. I really am exercising my inner brilliance, and I hope that it reflects your inner brilliance.
Fantastic. And as always, those links will be available in the description. So
Thank you.
it won't be hard to find you. Laura, thanks again.
Thanks.
And that concludes this episode of the Smiling Human podcast. Thank you so much for listening. But before you go, I have 2 invitations for you. The first invitation is to receive a free gift. I've created a free insight journal. This is a 30-day self-reflection and introspection journal that you can download at no cost in the description below. Go have a look and join the journey. The second invitation I have for you is, if it feels within your means and possible for you, then please head over to patreon.com/thesmilinghuman. Becoming a patron will give you access to perks like behind-the-scenes footage and access to live Q&As with me monthly. You also get voting privileges to help pick new guests or to help guide other episode content. Truly, the support of listeners like you, paid or unpaid, goes a long way. So if you could like, share, subscribe, and give a rating on the podcast app, all of that goes a long way. Thank you to each and every one of you who's been on this journey with me. See you again soon.